significant importance, especially in terms of the rationalization of changes which needs to be brought in to the tax administration and tax mechanism across the globe today. So it's a very important topic, and also we can call it as a very threshold topic as such, because whatever the practices and principles we were following till March 2020 has suddenly gone for a big change due to a lot of global changes which are taking place, especially in the front of business. So there is a redefining of the entire emergence of what we call it as the nations. So there is a reallocation of or transformation, what we call, between different countries across the globe, and we have a new world order which has emerged, wherein the position of the countries which were standing before 2020 has now gone for a drastic change. And there are new countries which have come up, especially the Asia-centric economics, what we call as like India, which is a major country, and of course Taiwan, Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, and all these countries which are surrounding the Asian-centric. So suddenly this has got a big momentum now, and the world is looking towards Asian-centric economy now. So since the business is moving towards Asia-centric, definitely there are a lot of changes which will be taking place in the area of how we will be looking at business going forward. So we have studied enough about the COVID impact, but today I will be talking something about the impact of COVID on international taxation. So I'm not getting to too much dry of that concept, because since most of you will be hearing this concept for the first time, so I will not get into too much into the depth of the subject, because it's a very, 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 very complicated and a vast subject, which involves a lot of treaties, negotiations, avoidance agreements, and all those things to be understood in order to know how the taxation happens in the international arena. So having said so, I will not get in, as I make a disclaimer that I will not get into too much of the concepts. I'll just explain you the major things which are there in the international taxation. And definitely, if you people are really interested to pursue a career in this angle, right, I think this is the right time for you. You need to pitch into international taxation, because huge opportunities are opening up in this segment as an advisor, or as a consultant, or as a subject matter expert, or if you want to take it as a career where you want to do some research. I think this is the correct topic which you can just look upon, where there are a lot of still unearthed areas or unexcavated areas, we can call it as, in this particular topic, where you can really bring out good research papers, and also you can have good research topics which you can work upon. So having said so, I have a brief small presentation which I would like to share with you. So let me share the presentation first. I think you have disabled me. If you can give me access, I can just share you my presentation.
Sure, sir. Yeah. Can you try now, sir?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I think my presentation is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So I'll be just, as I told you, I'll be just taking through this particular topic in a very nutshell way. Okay, I'll not get into too much of the topics which are there, subtopics which are there in this main topic. So I'll be just briefing you about what are the important components, or what constitutes international taxation. So how India is prepared for these challenges, which is already there, which is in progress now. And if you see some 1 week, 15 days back, there was a Vodafone case which has come up, where the International Arbitration Court has given a verdict in favor of Vodafone. So even though India had made a very good retrospective amendment, and the basic thing is our legislation itself is questioned in international arbitration. So see the impact of how things are changing and how how we should be prepared in order to face such international challenges, especially in terms of our laws are concerned. So even our laws have been set aside when the giving arbitration awards were given, right? Even our legislative passed law. So we know that in democracy, legislature plays a very important role, and whatever the act which is just enacted by the legislature has its own effect on the system of the economy which is there in that particular country. So today the arbitration award has come in such a way that it has questioned the basic existence of our law itself. So the retrospective amendment which was made into the Income Tax Act on that particular provision, right, that itself has been questioned in international arena today. So see, these are the challenges which are there, okay, to just let you know what has happened in the 15-20 days back. That's what I wanted to tell you. So having said so, first of all, let us understand what are the things which are very important in today's competitive world. The first important thing which we need to understand is there is something called as BEPS. Okay, BEPS is nothing but base erosion and profit sharing. See, this is a very important phenomena which is there across the globe, where the international communities are coming together in order to protect themselves from losing their revenue. So I think you people know that one of the basic components of any economic or public revenue system is taxation. So taxation is one of the major source of revenue for any government to raise, and for the purpose of making capital formation is concerned. The importance is more on how you earn the revenue and what are the sources through which you earn the revenue. That becomes a very important thing. So we normally call it as fiscal policy. So the question of all the countries today, so it's not only India I'm focusing on, I'm talking about the entire world. The major developing nation and developed nations which are more concerned with is about the operations of business, where the profits are getting transferred or shifted to the tax haven countries in order to just save tax. So this is something which has happened across the globe, and every country are now coming to an understanding where they want to protect their domestic revenue being erased or eroded out of their system, and going and forming the part of revenue system of some other country which has given the tax benefit or tax zero tax impacts. So today, most of the countries in the world are forming their own arrangements, and to that extent, the international organization called as OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, has come together in order to find a solution for this. And the BEPS is one of the major thing which is making a lot of noise across the world today. So the BEPS is basically phenomena or the policy matters which will be concerned with their respective member nations, wherein it focuses on shifting the profits of other tax jurisdictions, which usually have lower rates, thereby eroding the tax base in country. So in India, this is also one of the major issues where we see a lot of companies coming and operating in India, making huge businesses, and huge revenues are generated out of Indian system. But when it comes to the question of paying taxes are concerned, they are not contributing towards the revenue generation because there are a lot of loopholes in the system itself. So in order to have a check on these type of revenue losing of the economies are concerned, the BEPS has been come up with the major changes which the Indian economy has also integrated into its tax reforms. So there are a lot of provisions like 10B provisions are there, and other 92A provisions on transfer pricings which have been mentioned in detail in our Income Tax Act, which talks about this BEPS provisions are concerned. So there are a lot of things which are happening around, especially the multilateral convention to implement tax treaties related measures, basically to prevent this base erosions and profit sharing. So this is a G20 BEPS project which was launched somewhere around 2018, where the BEPS project to tackle base erosion and profit sharing through tax planning strategies that exploit gaps and mismatch in tax rules to artificially shift profit to low or non-tax locations. This has been taken as a strategy of today business, where they want to set up a business in those establishment countries where they try to garner the resources from that particular countries, they try to garner the markets and the consumer base which are there in that particular countries. But when it comes to the question of sharing of revenue or paying of taxes for that country for whatever the income they generate, they are not keenly interested to do that. So in order to do that, they carefully plan. There is, we don't call it these are tax evading measures. It's a tax avoiding measure only, because they do it somewhat in terms of legally, okay, where they shift their tax base from one country to another tax haven countries or no tax countries. And in that process, even though resources are used, even though the competition is exhausted within the same country, still they try to, they don't want to pay the revenue in form of taxes to that particular government. So even though we have given so much of resources used for them, and even though we are spending so much of energy and activities on that particular companies in India, but end of the day, they are not generating or not paying any taxes to the government. So that means the entire efforts of the government, especially in not preventing these companies to compete with our local domestic industries, right? So that has become a very big challenge for India. So they are exploiting the resources, and also they are taking away the businesses from our domestic companies. But end of the day, they are not contributing towards the revenue of the government. So this is something where the exploitation of such companies are happening across the globe, especially in developing countries. So the OECD, which is the primary body which has come up with multilateral conventions, especially with member nations, it has recommended for going for various treaties related measures, or bilateral or trilateral, or an agreement, double taxation related agreements with different member nations, in order to protect themselves from such type of base erosions of profit and profit. So this is one thing which the OECD has told, and this needs to be ratified now. So government is keenly working on that. If you see the current budget also, there were some announcements which were made in this equalization levy scheme and all those things, where the government wants to try to bring some changes, especially in the form of the agreements or treaty which they have entered into some quite long years back. So it's a need for ratification of those treaties or revisiting the treaties. They want to come up with the new provisions, add new provisions after this post-COVID era, where the entire economic system itself has undergone for change, and the business model is still going for a change after this digital revolution is concerned. So keeping those things in mind, even the government is also working on this, and this is part of the OECD mechanism under which it has advocated for the going for new treaties or new agreement measures, especially in order to protect their own industries and own economy from losing the revenue because of these BEPS. So I think this is a very important area where the convention has focused maximum on, like prevention of TT abuse or to curb revenue loss, or dispute resolution through mutual agreement procedures. So dispute has become one of the major thing. So I was talking about the Vodafone case, where that dispute is still pending from 2007 onwards. So it was a case which was worked in 2006-7, but the resolution has not still happened. So government has now gone ahead and started questioning the International Arbitration Award itself. So it is challenging that award, and government wants to take it to the international court, where they want to say that any legislation passed by any country should not be questioned by any administrative tribunal, like what the body was just done with the Vodafone case. So yes, there is a fight which is going on. It's already 13 years. Still the case has not been, has not found a solution for the case. So the dispute resolution mechanism is something which needs to be in a robust way, where we can address the issue and try to find a solution for the issue at a immediate level. So we have these cases, okay, domestically we have a lot of cases which are pending, in spite of government coming with some Vivad Se Vishwas scheme and all those things for domestically run businesses. Still we find a lot of income tax irregularities which are there, and you know what is the status of the percentage of people who are filing the income tax domestically. So similarly, we have a lot of challenges when it comes to the dispute resolution, mechanism when the international companies or international bodies or two nations are involved in any tax disputes. So the first and foremost focus should be on this dispute resolution, because we cannot keep on dragging the cases to go on for years to years in the process where we are losing the significant revenue contribution, which is very important at this point of time post-COVID in order to drive the economy back to its normal stage. So the aim of the government should be to go for more negotiations way. Talking is the best method. And India has now started having a very good relationship with the neighboring countries and across all the business partners across the globe. So today, this is the right time and right situation where India should go for a new ratification of treaties or bringing amendments to its already existing bilateral agreements or conventions, whatever the India was following for so many years. I think this is a right time for the mechanism of revenue authorities in India to bounce back, and they need to come up with a detailed plan of action as to how they can overcome all these things which has happened for so many years, where India has lost a lot of its resources by the companies without getting any tax benefit to the system. So I think this focus should be more OECD, whatever the mechanism, what the OECD has told, the government should seriously implement these things. Profit are taxed where substantial economic activities generating the profits are carried out, and where value is created. So this is the thing what the convention has suggested. Okay, so convention has put the onus of collecting the tax revenue on those countries where the economic activities are getting impacted because of operations of their business. So economic operations in the sense the market system which is prevailing in that particular economy, or the consumption-based system or the investment-based system in the form of FDIs or FIIs, whatever is flowing to that economy. See, those are the economic activities what they are talking about. So if any countries which are involved, which is getting major impact because of the business arrangements, where the economic activities are directly getting impacted, right? That is the countries on which they can take up the measures in order to bring the agreements into a proper shape, so that the BEPS cannot be, BEPS should be avoided in order to make sure that things will play. So that's what the convention is all about. The convention ensures consistency and certainty in the implementation of BEPS project in a multilateral context. So basically between 2-3 concepts, because these are the things which needs to be talked and discussed. Okay, this is not that only India should frame this policy, because the counter policy will be also there from the member nations. So just like how the WTO is working towards bringing in the uniformity in the trade in the international arena among the most favored nations and member nations, in the similar way, this taxation matters also should be done. That's the objective under which the government is working towards now. So the convention should give importance to multilateral thing, because what India has the relationship with, let us say China, or the relationship with US, there are two different types of relationship which India has. Similarly, India has different types of relationship with Israel, or with European countries or something like that. So you cannot expect all the relationship with all the countries to be of the same platform or the same size. But there is a difference which arises, and that is what the convention is talking about. We need to have a multilateral agreements, especially depending upon what type of understanding we have, not only with the income tax front, but from other aspects like cultural relationship, trade relationship, or the social relationship what India enjoys with other country. So even that needs to be considered before we go for having an arrangements with those countries. The convention also provides flexibility to exclude a specific tax treaty and opt out of provision or part of provision through making of reservation. So there should be more of flexibility in the convention. That's what it says. So free exit and entry should be there. So whenever we think that you cannot stick on to the rules or regulations stating that this is the hardcore rule you need to practice. So convention should be more of a negotiable in nature, and it should be more of flexible compared to one country with the other country. So that's what exactly the point which has been raised here. So they want more of flexibility in the operation of how the treaty should focus more on. So what are the benefits for India? If you ask, the first and foremost benefit what India can derive is the multilateral convention will enable the application of BEPS outcome through modification of existing tax treaty in India in a swift manner. That's a very, very important today because the economies of the world has undergone for transformation due to COVID. So I think this is the right apt time for India to renegotiate, because we were at the receiving end at a lot of times. Because what Indian economy was prior to March 2020 is not what Indian economy today is. So how India is visualized in the global context today is not what it was prior to March 2020. So definitely we were at the receiving end during those days, and now time is apt for us to revise ourselves or make ourselves equipped with to be on the more of the bargaining side, and start negotiating in a fresh form, and see that we have upper hand or dominate the other systems where we were earlier somewhat, I'll not call it as losing stance or something like that. We were not at the with par with what India should have been expected with. So we were somewhere went for a compromise formula because of our own economic situation which prevailed prior to 2020. So now, since we are in a very good position, I think renegotiation of these treaties or bilateral agreements are very important from the point of making a very safe or better rules for India, so that we can safeguard our interests back home here. So I think that should be the focus point in our as a benefit for India if you go for negotiation now. It is also India's interest to ensure that all its treaty partners adopt BEPS anti-abuse outcome. Yes, it's not just one or two countries following this BEPS anti-abuse outcome. This should be across all the member nations. So unless and until if we have this as a uniform practices across the globe, still there will be a lot of companies which will be competing from the back end, still making use of this tax haven or zero tax countries as a base in order to build the system and do the transactions. So this will definitely have an impact on the other economies because it will not only kill the domestic system, but also it will be killing the other competitive mechanisms which are prevailing in the system. So keeping that in the larger interest, all the member nations should come together here. They need to come up on the common platform and have a common treaties signed, especially in which are at the interest of safeguarding their own countries from exploitation by these tax haven countries or zero tax countries. So I think this is the right time where the countries should wake up and rise for new reforms, especially in the international taxation front. The third one is the convention will enable curbing of revenue loss. That's a very important thing. Revenue loss is what this entire objective of this, the mechanism of BEPS avoidance, anti-abuse outcomes are. So they are focusing more on that through treaty abuse and base erosion and profit shifting strategies, by ensuring that profits are taxed where substantial economic activities generating the profits are carried out and where value is created. So these two important words you need to remember whenever we talk about BEPS. One is if there is an economic activity which is created in that country, then the taxation needs to happen in that country. So if there is an significant economic changes which took place because of the operation of X company working in that particular country, whether it's registered or not, whether the place of establishment is there or not, so that doesn't matter. What matters is if there is any economic activities carried, or if there is any value addition which has been happening in that particular country, right? Then it becomes very important to tax such transaction in that country. So that's the focus point on which the multilateral agreement should focus on. So we need to convince the countries where the companies are registered and which is operating through various forms in different countries. So we need to make it clear that if there is any economic activity which is impacted because of that particular company doing the business in that country, or if you say there is some value additional activity which that company has done in that particular country, then definitely they need to be assessed for tax in that country. So that should be kept as a base, irrespective of whether they have the place of establishment or they have a place of business in that country, or Are they using any platforms or any type of ventures in that particular countries or whatever it is? So that becomes the secondary part. The primary part is, have they contributed to any economic activity, or have they added some value in that particular country? So if their services or if their manufacturing or production, whatever they're doing, it is taking into consideration these two important aspects, then definitely they need to be assessed for tax in that country for whatever the revenue they are generating in that country. So that's what the OECD model says, and I think that needs to be very importantly. That's a very important point which needs to be taken out. So this coming back to this multilateral agreements, related measure agreements, is aimed to prevent firm from moving profit out of country. So that's the objective which I was keep on mentioning all this time. And out of 93 tax treaties notified by India, 22 countries have already ratified the MLI so far, and the double taxation avoidance agreement with these countries will be modified by MLI. So still a long way to go. And this was done before pandemic. Okay, so I think there is still a scope, new scope which has arisen now. So whatever the 22 countries with which we have ratified those treaties, right? I think it needs to be revisited, because that has taken place before March 2020. So before pandemic, because again the shift is there, the things have changed in the economy, and it's a right time for us now to go back and revisit those clauses which went for amendment. Out of 93 country, what we went for amendments for based on MLI. So I think this is the area where the revenue ministry and the other authorities which are working towards this business modules in India, right? I think they need to strictly adhere to this policies of changes which they need to make in the coming months. And these are the need-based thing which is there on the priority list. And the government should frame the committees and look into this on a priority basis. So still the world is again going for the second and third phase of this post-COVID impacts. I think there is now ample time for India to renegotiate all these things. And we need to be on the leading front now in order to take this as an advantage, as an opportunity for India in the coming years. So the MLI will came into force from October 2019, and since it's already only 2 years old, and in that major portion of the transformation, what happened during COVID era is not still considered it, because no one predicted about all these changes. So I think this needs to go for again a redrafting of new things, because what was world existing before 2020 is not the world which is existing after this November 2020. So there is a drastic changes which has taken place, especially in the form of a group of nations coming together, the economy forces which are pushing the economy back to the normalcy, the various components like the new world order and the new economic treaties and relationship which has started coming, especially in the redrafting of the G7 nations and G20 countries, or Gulf economic cooperations coming back with new modifications, and you can see those changes which are happening in the globe. So I think this whatever the 2019 what the time the MLI was initiated by OECD, right? I think this needs to be revisited once again. So because the concepts or the line of demarcations of how the things are changing, that's the economies are getting redefined, we can call it as in simple. And there is a new world order basically, where India, China and US have become the major nations in the world after pandemic. So I think this needs to be again relooked into, and government needs to push serious efforts by forming different committees and take this as a matter of urgency, and the importance needs to be given more to this, because before we see that a lot of foreign companies coming into India, or different modes of transactions of business which is taking place in India, I think this is the right time India should wake up at a very fast rate and try to see that no revenue loss happens to India in the coming years. So that's the advantage what we need to now capitalize upon. This is the area where we can garner more and more revenues, because more and more foreign institutional investors are flowing back to India. You are seeing what is happening in the share market and who are driving the share markets now. So the contribution of FDI and FIs, and also the investors who are putting the money in the share market, right? So one big disclosure which was made some 1 week back is that most of the investors who are flowing the money into the equity market, right, they are all from Mauritius and all those tax haven countries. So that is one serious thing which is there. So many people are coming, Indian citizens, most of them are Indian citizens. They are pushing the money from the different source. So I think that is one of the thing which needs to be looked upon as a major source. I think someone has a question. Someone has raised a hand. Hello? Someone has a question?
Guys, if anybody has a question, please come up, or you can drop
Yeah,
a
someone raised their hand.
box. Yes, sir.
So we'll take the questions at the end or how?
Yes, sir. We can take it at the end.
Okay, fine. Thank you. So yeah, this is what we talk about when base erosion profits are concerned, and especially coming back to this OECD. OECD stands for Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. This is one major body which is working towards harmonizing the various economic concepts and bringing the cooperation between various developed and developing nation and underdeveloped nation. So they are the parties who are taking the very much big lead, especially in order to harmonize the system of business across the globe. So it's a very important body which has a lot of which has taken a lot of initiatives and responsibility in order to bring all the major countries and also the developing and developed countries under one platform in order to address the key issues of where the country should not be exploited just because of they are not being in a position to compete with other countries. So OECD's proposal for taxing multinational enterprises to ensure large and highly profitable MNCs pay tax wherever there are significant consumer facing activities and generate their profit. So this is what OECD has told. The words which have whichever I've marked in underlined, right? That's very important. Consumer facing activities. So they are more now become very. They want to give more focus on the companies which are really penetrating into the day-to-day economic activities of that particular country. So that's what consumer facing activity means here. So any country, any company for that matter, which is penetrating into the economies, root of the economies of those country, where they are participating in the decision-making activities of the entire nation, but still they are not paying any taxes, or their revenues are not getting booked in that particular country, means it's a serious issue. So OECD clearly says that when the tax needs to be collected from these MNCs, that is multinational enterprises, if they have a significant consumer facing activities and they generate profits. So anything which is consumer centric, or that means which is getting involved with the root level of that particular country's business activities, right? Such countries, whether they have the establishment place there or whether they have operational things which is to be done there, first and foremost thing is they need to be coming under the tax jurisdiction of that particular country. So this is a very important announcement which has made most of the member nation accept for what the OECD has told. And this brings a real big transformation in those countries which were getting exploited, especially by big companies which were setting up the industries there with the place of establishment, or moving their profits to the base which were there in tax haven countries and all those things. But all the resources were utilized, the competition was there, everything they were demonized, and the share of revenue, whatever they used to get, even that they never used to give to the government. So this means it was an exploitation of those countries which was taking place. And OECD has come up with a very stringent norms, especially for their member nation, saying that this is what you need to do. And the advance ruling is one more important thing which is there today, especially in order to redress the tax disputes between two countries. So there is always a question of the jurisdiction of tax matters when it comes to the question of which nation should tax which type of transactions. So whether it should be even though there is an agreement between two nations, but still it becomes very difficult when it comes to the point of taxations are concerned. So there are a lot of issues which are being faced, especially with respect to a company coming and starting up a business, and they don't know what is the rate of tax they need to be assessed with, whether they need to go for domestic taxation or to go for double taxation. Application principles of taxations are concerned. So there is always a matter of dispute which arises in, especially in terms of taxation matters. So resolving the tax matters has become a very big challenge because of the jurisdiction issues. So there is definitely a jurisdiction issue between two nations, and which nation should try at which level of authorities and all those things. So in the process, what happens, the countries lose their revenue because of these tax disputes carrying on more for years and years and years. So what the advanced ruling authorities say about this is, it's one way of bringing the companies onto the table and trying to get agreed with them for the basic rates of taxation, and asking them to pay the tax based on that rate till the final assessments will be done based on in future. So at least this is something like collecting advance tax or fixing a tax limit for these people, saying that, okay, apply for advance ruling. So based on the transactions, what you are doing, we'll give a ruling, and that ruling is binding only on you people. So we will agree for that binding, whatever the amount of tax you are supposed to pay, or whatever the basis on which the tax should be assessed, all those things, okay, we'll agree at the initial stage itself. And you keep on paying tax based on that. So we'll decide this matter in a later stage, and we'll try to sort out the issue. See, here, this is advance ruling is a one big thing wherein you are not disturbing the tax revenue. Tax revenue you are getting at a regular intervals, but only thing is the rate of tax is not still confirmed. So that you can do it later on, but revenue you can generate, right? So instead of going for a dispute and without getting even the tax revenue at a normal rate over a period of time, simply going for a dispute and wasting time of all the administrative activities and all those things, it's not recommended. So advance ruling is one best way to try to resolve the issue. So what happens in advance ruling is, the person who wants to try to do some business in X country, let us say, he comes to that country. Okay, he comes to the country and approach the advance ruling authority. So he is not convinced with the taxation system or taxation mechanism, or is not convergent with the process, or is not convergent with the tax rates or administrative things in tax mechanism or exemption and all those things. So what he does, he goes to the authorities and he meets the assessing officer and tries to get a ruling for whatever the business is doing. So according to the ruling, he will be asked to pay some tax rates. So on the basis of that, he will be assessed for tax and he will be asked to pay the tax. So this ruling will be used only binding on that person. It cannot be for the other person who is doing the similar type of business. He cannot take that ruling given to X. Y cannot take the ruling. So why, if you want a ruling, you need to again approach the assessing officer and take the new ruling as a fresh. So this advanced ruling is sometimes which can save both the parties, that is the revenue authorities and also the business party. So business party also say is fulfilling the tax obligation of that or statutory obligation of that particular country, and at the same time tax authority are also collecting some tax from that company earlier to that which was not covering under the tax system. So I think advanced ruling has come as a very good mechanism, and it has become a very effective mechanism also today. So in India and Sweden, authorities that are independent of tax administration issue the advanced ruling. So this is there in between India and Switzerland and Sweden now. So this is how the mechanism today in India is. You can see the authorities which are working towards the dispute redressal mechanism in India. So we have an assessment, tax return. That process itself takes almost around 6 to 7 months. And then if you find any dispute which arises at that point of time, I've mentioned all the months and all those things, how much time it takes roughly. So in a pure case, I'm talking about this. Okay, this may be this case. These numbers can be exaggerated figures. Again, it can go up beyond that limit also in some specific cases. So this is in general. This is what it happens. Okay. So when you file the tax return, it goes for the assessment. So assessment is a place where the tax authorities try to assess your income tax returns, whatever you are filing. Then you can, if there is a dispute, then you can go to Commissioner of Appeals, or a dispute resolution panel will be there. You can go to them. So that Again, if you are not convinced with whatever the outcome of that particular appeals are, you can approach the tribunal. So appellate tribunals are there, income tax appellate tribunals are there, where you can go and try to get your matters redressed there, your concerns redressed there. So even if you are not happy with tribunals, you can go to the High Court and then to the Supreme Court. So now this is the area. This is what happened with the Vodafone and all. So they went up to Supreme Court, from tribunal to Supreme Court they went. And even after that, when the Supreme Court also came up with a verdict in favor of this Vodafone, still these people went to international court, especially in the form of arbitration. So it was referred to arbitration and the award was given by the arbitration. And again, still it is getting challenged by the government now. So see how much time it takes in order to get a dispute redressal. So advance ruling is one best mechanism which can address these issues. So why unnecessarily go to dispute? Why unnecessarily spare your time moving from one court to another court, wasting your time, wasting your money and all those things? Instead of that, go for an advance ruling. Take a ruling for your case and accordingly you start paying the taxes for your ruling. And let us wait and see how the assessment happens. And over a period of time, when you are convinced with whatever the exact mechanism under which you should follow, then follow that mechanism. So that is one way of redressing. And I think advance ruling is one thing which needs to be popularized in India in international tax aspects, because still we don't have advance ruling mechanism more effective with all the nations are concerned with. So since our stand has changed now over the last 10 to 12 months, so there is a quick need for us to equip our advance ruling authorities back home in India to drive this initiative in a big scale, so that we get into an agreement with all the new partners who wants to come to India and to start a business where they are not convergent with the tax administration mechanism which is in there presently. So I think we need to equip this with very good support and staff, and we need to have a very good authorities spread across all these cities, major cities of India. We need to have the advanced ruling authority. So whenever the foreign countries or any companies or MNCs comes to India and wants to start the business here, we need to make them sure that they understand the Indian tax administration mechanism and all those things. Then this is what the success rate and all those things. These are the statistics which have been taken from 31st March 2017. You can see the number of cases which are referred and the success rate of the cases. So still we need to do a lot of homework on this front. So I think the government is looking towards this, and this includes even domestic cases also. Okay, so this doesn't these are not only for international cases. There are a lot of domestic cases also which are there. So I think we are facing the same equivalent level of activities which are being challenged in both domestic and international front, especially when it comes to the question of dispute resolution. So we are very poor in dispute management. Okay. So what are the challenges? Addressing the high pendency cases are very big challenges. Composition of the AR is again a big challenge which is there, because we don't have this establishment spread across India. So we need to quickly form these teams, especially to cater to the needs of the demand in the businesses which are coming to India now. I think we need to equip with the latest technology and all those things, equipped with the offices, and set up a separate cell for advanced ruling authorities in all the departments, income tax department in the major cities of India. At least we need to focus on the major cities of India today. Then binding nature of ruling and appeal. Yes, of course, binding between both the parties, that is the tax authorities and the companies which are concerned with advanced ruling. Timelines, yes, presently we have timelines for 1 year, 2 years for some cases. I think that needs to be again re-looked into, looking at the changes in demand and the number of companies which are coming into India. So these are all there which are framed before COVID. Okay, so this needs to be revisited. So that's where the challenges lies now. Interest liability owing to a delay in pronouncement of rulings. So that should not be taken as one of the major things here. Parliament could seek annually from there a report on the advanced ruling regime in India. So yeah, that's very important. Some monitoring authority should be there and see how we are progressing on that front. So I think that's a very good thing which needs to be equipped with the changes of fast growth and development now. Separately, a system of formal communication guidance on 6-monthly basis from ARR to the ministry could be instituted. Yes, again, they need to be, because these are becoming a very effective tools for revenue generation, where in order to minimize the dispute angle from income tax purpose. So more we minimize our dispute thing, right? I think more revenue will come and more people will become interested to comply with the tax system. So today, Indian tax system, why it is becoming complicated means because people don't want to get into too much of questions from income tax authority. So keeping these things in mind, faceless assessments have come, proceedings have taken place, all India based proceedings, tax proceedings have taken place now. So the government is going for rationalization of tax mechanism also. But the pace at which it is going is not the pace at which we will be looking after the post-COVID era. We need to go in a very fast manner so that we can address these issues in a very fast way. Then a very important thing is again general anti-avoidance rules which came into effect from financial year 17-18. Basically, it's called as GAR. Okay, so what is this anti-avoidance agreements, anti-avoidance rules? See, this is basically formed inherent with the tax mechanism or the Income Tax Act, which is there in India today. So it's a concept which generally empowers the revenue authorities in a country to deny the tax benefit of a transaction or arrangements which do not have any commercial substance or consideration other than achieving the tax benefit. So there are a lot of transactions which happens in the business entity, especially between the head office or the branch offices, or between the two different companies which are with the same cause of actions and all those things. So there are a lot of interconnected arrangements or agreements we can say between which happens within the country, within the company, wherein the objective is only to take tax benefit. So there is nothing other than giving any value addition to through that activity. But the objective of arrangements, what they enter into, right, that arrangement is only for keeping in mind the benefit of tax what they can take. So that means these type of arrangements are drafted beautifully in order to see that they don't pay the tax. It's not an evasion of tax. We don't call this as an evasion of tax. It's just looking into the loopholes of the system where they can play around the system, and accordingly they do this. And this will have a huge impact on the revenue generation of the country is concerned. So what the government has done, they now want to go for bringing this arrangements, tax arrangements, in such a way that they want to see that each and every minute part of the transaction, what they are entering into between the country, between the companies, so that the tax benefit, whatever is accruing in that country, should be linked basically to the value additions, whatever they are doing. So value additions on one hand should be compensated with the benefits on the other hand. So if you have given only a value addition, you should get a benefit, tax benefit. It's not like you don't do any value addition or you don't add anything to that particular system, but still you opt for tax benefit. You get tax benefit out of that. So that means government doesn't get anything from this, because this will again result in bad competition in the system. So this type of arrangements will make the economic system very weak, because if you are not placing any control, or if you are not placing any mechanism to control these type of activities, right, then the other people may also follow this. Other company may follow such type of agreements. So it's better in the interest of the tax authorities to check on all these things. That is what the GAR does. So it's a rule which will be imbibed in the rules of income tax itself, wherein such type of transaction, if it is brought to the notification or if it is brought to their views at the time of assessment, right, they will catch hold of such persons in such transaction. They ask them to pay the tax, even though they have claimed the tax benefit in the genuine form. But as per, because the purpose is not claiming the tax benefit after giving value additional services or value additional things for the customer, but it is just claiming without giving any value addition. So these type of issues will definitely be very challenging things in India, especially when it comes to the question of dividends, distribution of dividends, or loans given to the intercompanies and all those things. So a lot of revenue and leasing and subleasing of assets and all those things are concerned. This is where they try to play around between the two companies. So this needs to be addressed as a top priority area, where they need to take the consent of those people. So applies to impermissible avoidance arrangements. So what are these impermissible Before that, I just tell you about some rules which are there in the Income Tax Act, which is basically Rule 10U is there. So this is one rule which has told that up to 3 crores threshold, nothing to worry about whether it adds economic benefits or not. That's not a concern. So we can just take give them a chance not to bring it under this strict rule of anti-GAR. So up to 3 crores is a threshold where they have given some type of relief to such companies, even though if they don't add values. Okay, let us wait and see. That's what they are told under Rule 10U. So coming back to this, yeah, this is one slide which shows how this IAA, that is implementable, impermissible avoidance agreements is all about. So you can see there what are the various criteria under which this will be assessed. So if you see that whether it creates rights or obligation which would normally be created between person dealing in arm's length. So arm's length, I think you people might be aware of when if you have studied something about transfer pricing. There you get that arm's length pricing method. There are 5 important methods of arm's length transactions, and you know which method to apply and when to apply that method. So that is a common principle when it comes to the question of related party transactions are concerned. So that's the base under which the transaction moves now. So that's where the areas where there is a scope for you to just take the tax benefit without providing some economic value addition to the customers or that particular economic activities by doing the business are concerned. So GAR tried to address those things. So that is called as impermissible avoidance arrangements. So if there is any impermissible activity which has taken place, so who defines this impermissible? Impermissible, they have told you here. They are given A, B, C, D, right? Those are the impermissible things. Creates right or obligation which would not normally be created by person dealing in arm's length, or result directly or indirectly in the misuse or abuse of the provision of the code, lacks commercial substance in whole or in part, is entered into or carried out by means or manner which would normally be employed for bona fide purposes. So if you come under, if your transactions, whatever you're doing, or the value, whatever you're trying to do, is coming under any of these 4 categories, then it is impermissible avoidance arrangement, and that attracts the Rule 10U, where you will be assessed for tax, even though there is no economic value addition which you have done, but you cannot claim tax benefit for the same. So the tax benefit cannot be claimed unless and until up to your total turnover is up to 3 crores. So that's what they've told. Beyond 3 crores, yes, you will be coming under the taxable value, and you will be assessed as a regular taxpayer, and you need to pay taxes for that, and you cannot take the benefit of GAR there. So that's what it's there. And again, one of the important section 97.2, which talks about round trip financing. There, we see such type of financing happening in various businesses. Okay, what is this round trip? It includes any arrangement in which through a series of transactions, funds are transferred among the parties to the arrangement, and such transactions do not have any substantial commercial purpose other than obtaining the tax benefit. So we see these things happening in many of the companies which are floated in India from especially the foreign countries. So they create their own ventures with multiple ventures embedded into them, and they start transferring the money from one organization to another organization. This is called as round trip financing. So that fund comes in the operational activity, but at the time of significantly giving the details for the tax purposes, they claim that that was only for tax benefit. They have moved that money from their own ventures within the system. So if that doesn't add any commercial value, that may be an activity which you are doing it internally, but which you think that it is not adding commercial value, but definitely there is an impact on the generation of revenues are concerned. So definitely such type of things will attract the GAR provisions, and they will be assessed for tax in the normal circumstances. So this is one of the thing. And the Vodafone case I was talking about, I'll not get into the detail of Vodafone case. That is basically about the retrospective amendment, what I was talking about. So that's one of the things which India is using quite often wherever they see that there is a stake for their revenue not getting recognized properly, then suddenly they go for retrospective amendment. So retrospective amendment is not a solution for all the problems, because this will have a serious impact on the companies which are trying to come to India, where they are seeing that today the tax compliances in India is a very tough challenges for them. So we need to give them such type of comfort zone if they want to come to India, that we need to make our tax administration as a very strong mechanism, which is considering the whatever the concerns are there with the foreign countries. But that if you go for retrospective amendment, definitely yes, you since it's a legislative body, you can do it. But in the long run, this will have an impact on the companies which want to come and start new businesses in India, because they will be worried about such type of retrospective amendments may have even big impact on them in future. So they may think of either operating from some other cost, say, having countries like Singapore or Taiwan or Thailand or Indonesia or some countries like that, where they don't have such strict provisions, which will be having a very big impact on the economic systems. So I think India need to look it into a very more positive way when it comes to the question of going for retrospective amendments are concerned. So this is one of the biggest case where retrospective amendment were made, and India was expecting around 22,160 crore rupees from Vodafone for violating the provision of the transfer what it made to Hutchison in 2006. So it's a serious dispute which arose, and the retrospective amendment is again questioned in the international arbitration now, and this has a very long way to go still, because now the counterclaims by India has been raised, especially by the Ministry of Finance is trying to go to the international court in order to say that whatever the legislative mechanism is in India is there, it should not be questioned. You cannot question the whatever the legislature has passed. So arbitration doesn't have right to question such type of arrangements. So I think somewhere down the lane, we need to revisit all these things, keeping in mind the future of India is concerned, especially in terms of the opportunities which are flowing back to India is concerned during the post COVID era. So yes, interest of India is also important at the same time, but it should not be at the expense of not having a very good relationship with other countries. So we need to have a balance between our legislature and also about how our system needs to be managed when it comes to the question of maintaining very cordial and good relationship with other countries are concerned. I think that is a point where we need to talk about. So I'll not get into these things. SAR is one of another thing where it is called a special anti-avoidance rule. The GAR is general, but special is only in case of certain categories of customers or certain categories of companies, we can call it as. So SAR is also a provision which has been there in Indian tax administration mechanism, where it focuses on only special transactions which are concerned with only specific related businesses. So GAR and SAR are both applicable, and these are specific and will produce time and cost involved in tax litigation. So ultimately bring down the litigation level. So make it more what do you call whatever customer-based system, so that you should not be like a watchdog, or you should not be like a dictator or something like that. So people should not fear coming to tax authorities. So the dependency of the tax authorities also, or in the form of control and all those things, should also slowly fade away, so that we create an environment wherein the people or the companies voluntarily come forward in order to pay their taxes and assess their income. So that should be the ultimate objective. So tax litigation is also one of the key things which the government should work it on a very stringent way now. This provides certainty to any taxpayer while formalizing special arrangements. So if you want to get into any arrangements, better get it involved with the government and organizations of tax authorities, so that at least you can be on the safer side in the coming months. Just like how R was there, right? Anti-avoidance rules, what I talked about. So GAR also should focus on those things. They need to add some, at least some economic benefit in order to take the tax benefit. So that intention should be embedded in their activity, business activity. They doesn't provide any discretion to the tax authorities, and there is always a possibility that the taxpayer find loopholes and circumvent these limited application specific provisions. So deviations from the provision should not happen. That's the ultimate thing what I wanted to mention here. Then we have advanced pricing agreement. So this is again a very important process, if you can see here. So advanced pricing agreement is how you get into an agreement in a detailed form involving the CBDTs concerned. So you can see the unilateral and bilateral agreement APA which is there. So here the taxpayer and APA team is there. APA team is again constituted by authorities, tax authorities which are more relevant in those countries, and have a price agreement. So before you venture into the transaction with X country or Y country, why don't you have an agreement, okay, on advanced price agreement as such, wherein you can say and communicate and say that this is what the price which you have agreed for, and based on which the transaction will be going forward done. So instead of assessing officer coming and asking for you the information, or after you filing the returns, assessing officer again going back and checking your records and all those things, why don't you go for a formal price agreements, okay, advanced price agreements before you venture into the tax authorities. So have this communicated with CBDT and DGIT and all these people. Have a prior understanding with these authorities. So you only voluntarily approach the tax authorities and tell about the advanced pricing agreements, and have a bilateral agreements, or it can be unilateral agreements also. So whatever the agreements is there which you are entering between two countries or with only single country, yes, you can have these agreements with both the countries being ratified with the tax authorities, so that tomorrow you are in the safer side. So you don't need to go for any notices from the tax authorities, or no need for you to frequently visit tax authority in answering their questions, or the assessment procedures will be very simple for you. No need to give a lot of declaration about all those income sources and all those things, because there is an agreement already with that particular tax authorities, where you have already taken an approval from that topmost body called a CBDT, Central Board for Direct Taxes. So there is a approval authority for this APA. So you enjoy the preferential things there. So tomorrow there is no need for you to worry about that assessing officer may come and chase you for question you for tax related thing, or you may expect some sort show cause notice or summons from the tax authorities where you need to go and present yourself. See, unless and until you are within that whatever the agreements is there, right, within that part and parcel of those agreements, and if you are doing the business within that limit, right, then definitely there will be no issue for you. So APA is a very important thing in international taxation today. So you can make use of this benefit of advanced pricing agreements, wherein you can enter into this contract much in advance before you come across any issues. So that is one thing. Then Central Board of Direct Taxes has entered into 26 advanced pricing agreement this year. And the Indian APA program has been appreciated nationally and internationally for being able to address complex transfer pricing issue in a fair and transparent manner. So this is one of the biggest advantage what the APA has done. Then again, safe harbor rules are there. This is a very important thing which you need to know. And this has been again embedded into our income tax rules. So safe harbor rules, again, the name itself tells you it's a legal provision to reduce or eliminate legal or regulatory liability in certain situation, as long as certain considerations are met. So if you are able to meet those transactions, whatever they are expecting, right, then you can be on the safe side. So that's what the safe harbor rule says. So they have listed out certain activities and certain provisions which needs to be followed by all the participants in those countries. So why don't you adhere to those minimum clauses which are there and become safe, so that tomorrow you don't have to go into the legal process and all those things. So even this will make the tax procedures in that particular country very simple, so that people also follows those taxation norms in that country. So certain category of taxpayers can follow a simple set of rules which has been set by the CBDT, that is Central Board for Direct Taxes, especially like transfer pricing, because that is one transaction which has a lot of questions and a lot of revenue leakages which are there, especially when you are moving to related party transactions. So why don't you follow the simple set of rules, okay, in order to do the transaction in India? So these are the guidelines which has been issued from the tax authorities over a period of time. So why don't, as a company which is coming from somewhere outside India, why don't you follow these practices? Why don't you adhere to the norms, simple norms, and try to do that business? So that will save you from a lot of things. So I'll not get into this because time is running out. So I'll not just take these things. So what is the advantage? Ease in compliance is one of the biggest advantage. Reduction in compliance cost is also one of the biggest advantages if you go for safe harbor rules. Then POEM is there, very important. I think most of you may be coming across this word every now and then. That is place of effective management. So place of effective management is the turning point for collecting taxes. Okay. So this is one thing where you need to establish where the place of establishment is all there. So that will be assessed for tax. So there are tests which is done. Place of incorporation is one thing, and place of control of management. And of course, the POEM itself is the place of establishment. So I'll not get into too much of this, but this is a very important thing. You can just go back and refer to what is this POEM is. Okay. So they have told how to identify whether that particular business is in India or not. So there are a lot of questions to it. There are a lot of counter arguments also for this, but taxation is depending on based on the place of establishment. So establishment rules is there. So I think that needs to be kept in mind before we talk about this. Then that's it. What I this important developments I want to say. Few 2 minutes I'll take in order to highlight what are the important developments which are taking place in India. One is automatic exchange of financial account information. So this is a very important measure to curtail the black money of India is concerned. So India has gone into an agreement with a lot of countries. Almost around 82 countries have gone for these type of agreements with Switzerland and other countries, tax haven countries, to get the informations. So they already Switzerland has twice shared the information with India about almost around 4 lakh SSEs information have been signed. That means 4 lakh accounts which have been parked in various banks in Switzerland, right? Those information is already given to India under automatic exchange of financial accounting informations are concerned. This is one big breakthrough which we can see in the international taxation areas, where the government is now trying to get the list of people who are keeping the money in foreign banks. So this entire money is not illegal money or black money. There may be accounted money also, we don't know, but the list sharing has become now possible. Earlier this was not possible, but slowly, yes, these type of arrangements between countries with cordial relationship, right? So now they are able to share those information. So even though initially it was a confidential data, they never used to say, but the tax authorities of countries especially have gone and met the federal tax authorities of various countries, and they are now getting through automatic exchange of financial account information, the various transactions, what is happening behind the scene. Financial Accounting Tax Compliant Act has been passed in order to see that these tax authorities have a proper mechanism across the globe. Then, of course, patent box regime, especially in India, in order to encourage the patent system in India, right? The patenting authorities, the patenting companies, which are there in India, which is using the patents of Indian innovations, which are registered in India, right? So such companies have been given tax rates of, to be charged at 10%. So apart from the normal 30 rates, what is the tax prevailing? 30, 20, 25%. Now these companies can only pay 10% tax. So these are the benefits what the company is giving in order to encourage the international organization to come and set up business in India. So these are the tax implications which are there. And of course, the Google tax or digital tax, what we call it as, in simple, we call it as equalization levy, which has been started from 2016 onwards. So there is a big change which has happened. Earlier, only non-resident e-commerce operators were involved. Only they were asked to pay 6% equalization levy tax in India, because these are the people who are doing businesses, who have a place of business outside India, but they don't have any place in business in India, but they are doing businesses on e-commerce transactions in India in a large scale. So they are competing with the domestic industries also in a large scale. So in order to bring these people under tax, in 2017, 2016, we had this e-commerce operators only covering, non-resident e-commerce operators who are covering. But now we have added even non-resident e-commerce players also, like Uber and all those people. So even they are also now added into this stream, and they are also supposed to pay 2% equalization levy on whatever the transaction or revenue or business, whatever they have done in India. So on the transaction, what they have done in India, right, on that they are supposed to pay. There were a lot of criticism for this also across the globe, why they should tax. US especially came heavily on this, on India, and started saying that this is illegal and all those things. But India clearly told that since the income is originating in India and revenue is generated from India by such companies, there is nothing harm in taxing such taxes in India. So source-based taxation, what India follows, right? So source is in India, so India should be taxed. So that's what the argument which India had made. So having said so, to conclude, there are a lot of challenges which are there. I think the Indian government should now come up with a robust mechanism in order to address those challenges, especially in the form of setting up of this advanced ruling cells in various cities and going for ratification of treaties. That is a major thing what India needs to do it in a priority way, because a lot of transactions are taking place in India and across the globe, wherein we can see a lot of mergers, cross mergers, and acquisitions, and a lot of companies from different localities coming to India, especially from China to India. Many companies are trying to move from China to India and other Asia-centric economy. So I think definitely India has a big scope in the coming months, and it's a high time for the Ministry of Revenue to pitch in and the tax authorities to pitch in and try to freeze a lot of challenging areas which are there in our international taxation. So thank you for your patience listening. If you have any questions, you can ask now. I can just try to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. So participant, please, if you have any questions, either you can raise it your hand or unmute yourself, or you can type it in the chat box. Sir, actually, I have one question here.
Yeah, please.
Sir, I just wanted to know, I mean, if you can throw some, career guidance over this international taxation, how best to way, one can pursue it, and how would be, helpful for our career guidance.
Okay, see, there are a lot of institutes which have come up with the short-term and long-term courses on international taxation. So if you are really interested in taxation matters, right, I think you can pursue those courses or diploma courses which are run across globe, okay, not only in India. There are a lot of international certification agencies which are carrying this international taxation as one of the main course curriculum. And I think since these are taxation models which are concerned with various countries, better to get an international certification for from those authorities which has a very good recognition across the globe. So coming back to the career opportunities, definitely there is a lot of role a consultant needs to play. Especially, I'll tell you one small thing. See, there are, as of today, the international taxation consultancy is done by only the big fours or big fives which are there, like KPMG or E&Y or such big Deloitte or such big companies are doing it, by PwC and all such people. So what about the services for a small-time business or small-time consultants like architects are concerned? There are a lot of NRI architects who are doing businesses across globe. So who will let them out with consultancy services like architects or royalty consultants or technical consultants who are doing it in a professional way, in an independent manner, right? They definitely cannot go and get the services of PwC or KPMG and such big firms. That big firms are restricted to big corporates. But if it is for small professionals or small consultancy services, because services are now across globe, they are providing the services with a small platform now. You can sit at a home and give services to various countries. So how do those people understand about tax implication of international scenario? Definitely there is huge scope of such type of people who can be your customers tomorrow. So I think you need to target international taxation, not with companies, better to target those people who are individuals, who are into practice, like small time consultants, like research associates or technical consultants or patent consultants, like that, who are doing the business internationally. So definitely those people will require advisory services of international tax consultant, and I think you people can think about your profession, your career in that way.
Sure, sir. Sir, any name of the institute, can you recommend?
Yeah, I can share you. I can share you those information. I can message you to Shiv Prasad and you can collect it from him.
Okay, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah, someone has asked the question about Zoom and
Yeah, there's a
and all those
question
things.
in chat box.
Yeah, I'm seeing that. See,
From
this is where this is the same case what I was talking about, digital tax and Google tax, right? These are the same companies which are coming under that. I told you about non-resident e-commerce operators, right? These are all operators. Amazon, Zoom, and all these people are operators who are providing services from somewhere in US, but they are providing services of economic benefit directly to the country in India. So they are now coming under equalization levy. They need to pay 6% of their revenue as tax to the government.
Got it, sir. Then what would be the case? I mean, they would, show that, we have business in both countries. So they are going to pay taxes in both the country or just one country?
Yeah, they need to pay it in both the countries.
But
That's
then, sir,
why
we have
US
that
has
double
questioned.
taxation.
That's why the US has questioned. Okay, see, double taxation avoidance agreement is there if you are not a e-commerce operator. Okay, for e-commerce operator, that particular concept is not there. It is for multinational companies which are having place of establishment in India.
Got it.
Okay, this is a different platform through e-commerce where you are sitting somewhere in outside India and you are trying to establish the control of business in India.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why US was against this thing. They told that this is illegal and all those things. But Indian government say no, source is in India, we'll be taxing it in India.
Okay, makes sense.
Any other question?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Sir, it's like I have created my career for 7 years. 7 years in finance, sir. Now, if I want to move to international taxation, how I should go ahead?
You are interested in
Because
taxation,
I don't have
right?
any experience in taxation as such.
No, that doesn't matter. But if you are
Yes,
really
sir.
interested in taxation, right, as subject taxation, you should be interested in subject taxation. Because before you go to international taxation, you should be well versed in domestic taxation as concerned. Okay. So are you interested in domestic taxation?
Yes, sir. But I don't have experience in that.
No, experience is not required. So first you need to join for some course where you learn about the direct taxes in India. Okay, just try to get familiar with what are the various income tax rules, income tax act, and all those things first, and how the system works in India, and what is the concept of direct taxes in India, and all those things. First, you become familiar with those transactions. You get a certificate in that direct taxes in India first. Then you can go for advanced diploma in international taxation. You can do it as a specialized subject in taxation then. So meantime, you can get the experience with direct taxes, then you can slowly shift to international taxation. Because without knowing, having the what do you call, foundation of tax management system in India, right, you cannot directly jump into international taxation.
Okay, sir.
So any other questions? Hope it was informative, right?
Yes, sir. Very much informative, sir. It was quite good, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, because what happens, right? If I want
So,
to get into the deep of the subject, right, it will not be interesting you because most of you are first-time listeners of international taxation. So there were a lot of case studies and all I did not want to go to because still you people are just now making an effort to understand what is international taxation. So that's why I did not talk about the case laws and all.
yes, sir. Sure, sir.
And sir, when this transfer pricing happens, I know a lot of the companies who handles transfer pricing, they would fix some rate, if they're transferring some money to India, even for the big fours like Deloitte and all that, they would fix. So like how this taxation would be handled. Like suppose they fixed at the year beginning, 70 rupees per dollar we would consider. Then, but the rates keep on changing. So like how this would be handled in terms of taxes.
No, those are two different questions you're asking. Transfer pricing is not nothing to do with foreign exchange accounting. Okay, foreign exchange transaction accounting is different. Transfer pricing is different. Transfer pricing is something which you do between related party transaction. Okay, so where the price is not the sole consideration for your transaction. So then your transfer pricing rules comes into picture there. So the question what you're asking is about the foreign exchange variation, right? Because the exchange rate varies from time to time.
Yeah.
You're asking about that.
Yes, like my understanding was if the company is working in two different geographics, so like if they have a transfer pricing rule, so there should be some taxation would also come into picture.
Yeah, that is transfer pricing section 92 is the right Income Tax Act. There they have given the provisions of how to deal with such transaction where there is a related party transaction between two companies of operating in different countries. So there are 5 methods which has been advocated by the authorities saying that what is the best method you need to use and how you should use that method based on double taxation avoidance agreements between the two countries and all those things. So those provisions are there. So if your question is on transfer pricing, you need to go back to section 92 of Income Tax Act, which talks about various provisions of transfer pricing. If you are asking question about exchange rates, okay, exchange rate, again, income tax provisions are there on exchange rate principle. What rate needs to be considered? Basically, RBI rates will be considered at the closing rates. RBI has given a guidance. Okay, what is the exchange rate you need to take for what transactions? So you need to apply that exchange rate, not the one which is coming on the markets or which are there in the banks or which is used by the customs authority. That is not the rate. For income tax purpose, it is RBI rate, Reserve Bank of India rates of exchange values we need to take.
Yeah.
It's a complicated topic. Okay, whatever the question you're asking is very right, apt, but it's a very complicated topic. Transfer pricing itself is a very complicated topic. There are
Thanks.
only transfer pricing consultants who are practicing. They practice only in transfer pricing area. They don't touch any other matters. So it's a vast subject. You can practice in only in that particular area itself. It's a vast subject.
Yeah.
So, sir, I hope the questions are no more arising now. I mean, things are clear with the students. So I would like to, request one of our friend Vaishnavi to give a vote of thanks from behalf of CMS Business School.
Hi, Vaishnavi on behalf of CMS Business School. I'm here to present the vote of thanks for today's lecture. I would like to thank our guest lecturer, CMA, Mr. Ravindranath Kaushik. Your thoughts have enlightened our mind and shown us a new path. Thank you, sir. And thank you to Sheriff sir and Murthy sir for arranging the lecture for us.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Thank you all for your patience listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much, sir.
Thank you,
Have a
sir.
nice
So all the best. All the best for you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you so much.